Oh, no reaction, nothing.
Hi.
Cool, awesome.
All right, hi everybody. That cheery opening for everybody.
Oh my god, yeah, this is gonna be a great,
Welcome,
happy episode.
welcome to episode 12 of the Mom and Eric podcast, where we talk about poor things. Poor things. Okay, poor things. This is another movie, just like our last episode on the holdovers. Where we focus on the holdovers. This is another movie that's very much in the Oscar conversation. So do you want to start with a description of what the movie is about, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure. The movie is about Emma Stone. She plays a character called Bella
Bella
Baxter, who
Baxter.
is
Bella
so.
Baxter.
The premise of the movie is that a woman who is pregnant decides to take her own life, and there's a mad scientist who decides to take her body, who decides to take the brain of the baby and put the brain of the baby into the body of the woman, and then that so it's basically like an infant in like a woman's body, and he raises her, and so it's very silly, if you could believe that, and basically it's the journey of her discovering life and relationships and sex and being a person, what being a person means to her. I think that's what it's about.
I think it should be said up front that this is a movie by Yorgos Lanthimos, who is an increasingly well-known filmmaker, because his last film, The Favorite, actually was a big Oscar contender too, and I think that Olivia Colman actually won the Best Actress for that. So anyway, he makes movies that are deeply weird and unsettling. And I have seen both The Lobster and The Favorite. I saw both of those movies, and I liked both of them quite a bit. So this is another Yorgos Lanthimos film, except that this one, I would say, it's far more centered on one character, which is Emma Stone's character. And then also Emma Stone herself served as an executive producer on this film. So she was she was deeply invested in this film in a way that she was not in The Favorite. She had a starring role in The Favorite, but I don't think that she was as involved in the production as she was for this one. So that's what the movie is about. And I will also say that this film, even though Yorgos puts a lot of thought into production design, like all of his movies live in very designed worlds, like very specifically, they look a certain way. I will also say that this is the most elaborate design that I've ever seen. So the visuals, it was like going from a 2, no, sorry, that's not fair. It's like going from a 4 or 5 on his previous films to suddenly going to like a 11 or 12. So the visuals were very, very dialed up. But anyway, before we talk about any of the particulars of the film, let's talk about how we felt about it. So do you want to go first?
I liked it. It was really, really funny. I went in knowing only that only the comment that was made that Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo have a lot of sex, and she masturbates a lot in the movie. So that was what my knowledge was. So in my mind, I was like, okay, that sure, let's go see it. But I came away thinking that it actually had a really great story, because it followed her journey the entire time, and it was a really interesting journey. And I also came away thinking, because I think I had heard some critiques that it was misogynist, and like a sexist story, but I came away thinking the opposite. I thought it was it aimed to be a tad bit more empowering and meaningful in terms of the story, because it was a really problematic sort of setup, like having an infant in a adult body, and then having that character just do the things that Bella Baxter was doing. But in essence, it was a very ridiculous premise that ended up yielding a lot of laughs and a lot of just like, huh, okay, like cool. So in that sense, I thought it was great. I really thought it was great. It just, but it's not like it was made for me, or it was like my type of movie. But it was fun to see with friends too. I was next to my friends, and obviously there's a lot of raunchy stuff in that. So like just sitting next to people watching that is very interesting. But yeah.
I'm really glad I didn't see that with you.
yeah, that would be weird.
Did your friends like it?
They did. I think so. I don't know. That I think the humor was the main selling point for everybody, because it would be really random sometimes, like, and I think Emma Stone offered a lot in terms of, and the writing offered a lot, like how she kept referring to sex as furious jumping. That was probably one of the funniest like references.
Yes.
And then my favorite thing was how Willem Dafoe would do the gas bubbles. Like, I didn't understand his explanation when he explained that. I just knew that they would cut back to him and just at a random point, and he'd just be doing that in the beginning of the scene, and I was dying. And also another thing that we commented on was just the visual design. Everything looked amazing, and the different countries that she visited, I could still remember very distinctively how unique it looked. And I also remember most, if not all, the set pieces. So very visually compelling. And even though the story wasn't like I didn't think it was like the best thing ever, it was still really interesting.
You want me to go?
Yeah, that's your time to jump in. So I talk, and then you go. Actually, so that's kind of
okay.
Podcast work. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. Okay. Sorry. Because I have a lot to say, so I want to be able to make space, but I don't want to just go on and on and on. So I will say upfront that I like this movie the least out of his films that I've seen, and I had to think about why I liked it the least. And so the way that I understand Yorgos Lanthimos' worldview is that he creates these alternate realities that are, some parts of it are recognizable as our society and our reality, but some parts of it are complete departures. He tweaks some fundamental things that he tweaks them in utterly absurd ways, which lends to the humor. There's a dark humor that permeates all of his movies. And so the thing about his movies is that these bizarre worlds where there's like one or two things that are completely far-fetched and fantastical, it's like you kind of accept it. You accept the absurd part of the rule because you want to see what the characters are going to do. And in the other two movies, The Favorite and The Lobster, I was really rooting for the characters to succeed in those alternate realities that they were in. So The Lobster is about people. I don't know if you know the premise of The Lobster, but The Lobster is about people who, if you do not find your assigned soulmate as determined by, if you do not find a life partner by age 30, and there's this like shadowy bureaucracy that decides if you have found a compatible person. So if you do not find your life partner by 30, you're turned into an animal of some type. So it's people who realize that this deadline is coming up to find their life partner because they don't want to turn into an animal. And so they're desperate for all these like mechanisms to try and meet their life partner and their soulmate. And some people are like, they're willing to go so far as to fake compatibility in order to avoid being turned into an animal. And so the movie is about that. And then it's about these people who decide to live outside of the rules because they decide that they don't want to be confined that way. So anyway, my point is that There was real for me in the lobster. There was real. There's really there were things at stake, important things at stake. It was a commentary on how artificially, artificially our society, like how we artificially value, monogamous relationships, heteronormative relationships. Like we're very sort of tradition bound, and so it shows how confining that is, in this absurd world where you get turned into a lobster or a border collie or a deer or whatever. It's very random and it's very frightening, and people are freaking out about it. They're like, "Oh Jesus Christ, I don't want to do this. Like I don't want to be, I don't want to be I don't want to be a dog. I don't want to be a cat." So I cared so much more about the characters in the other movies, because I felt like these were characters who were trying to negotiate the rules of the universe that they were living in. But in in Poor Things, it is really about that theme, but I felt like there were so many things that were creating emotional distance between me and the characters. So one aspect of what you refer to as problematic in terms of her brain being, an infant's brain being spliced into her body, it wasn't just that was problematic. It was all of the bizarre scientific experiments that were going on. They like these horrifying experiments where you see all these like hybrid animals, wandering around. And so I think that all of this was being done in the nature of improvement. So Willem Dafoe's character Godwin said that he saved Bella because he thought that it would be better that she was alive rather than dead. That he saved, he was able to save a part of the woman and a part of her child, by splicing them together. But the whole question of ethics, like ethics of conducting these types of experiments, that's how can I say this? That's harder for me to wave away than this idea of a society where you get turned into an animal if you don't find your soulmate. Like, it's that willing suspension of disbelief, like, oh, I'm just supposed to forget about the fact that he's this mad scientist who's like, performing these grotesque experiments on things. And then I'm supposed to get to the central themes, which, by the way, I think are really important themes. I think that Poor Things is entirely a movie about women being confined and being denied agency, and how hard they have to, how much strife and trauma they have to go through in order to achieve any level of agency, like any level of agency over their own destiny, over their own outcomes. And so the bizarre thing is that the characters of Godwin and his assistant, who was played by Rami Youssef, I think, their characters were portrayed as good because they're the ones who would give Bella Baxter the most agency over her future. They were the ones who wanted to control her the least. But at the same time, they were the ones who were totally fine with this terribly ethically problematic experiment that was going on everywhere. Like, oh, it's fine. Yeah, it's just fine that we like cut open people and transplant their organs and blah 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 blah, all in the name of science.
I think, yeah, and I think that stuff you're mentioning about Willem Dafoe's character and his character, like, are subverted through the humor. I think because of how absurdist it sort of is, it makes you,
yeah,
and because it's in like an alternate sort of universe, it's like it's not as big a deal. And I think the main thing with Willem Dafoe's character specifically, it's like he would do those crazy things. He's like a mad scientist, and that's his whole thing. And that, while that would make me uncomfortable, then he would go on to describe how all the things his father did to like that made him the way he is. So that is, and I was like, oh right, okay, that's what makes him that character. And then I mean, I wasn't super into the guy. I forgot his name. But the assistant.
We should know. Yeah, we should know his character. Hold on.
Yeah, but he was just playing just like a sweet, innocent guy, but like who couldn't really do much at all, honestly. And like that's why the scene with him and Mark Ruffalo is really funny, because they're on like completely opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yes,
but
his name is Max.
But what actually
McCandles.
Yeah, but what drew me into their characters besides the humor in the beginning, that kind of made me accept who they were for those things, especially when they were talking about, you know, the actual how Bella was created. That's like that. I was like, holy fuck, they were so weird, like, you know. But somehow when they when they were talking about when she was gone and she was off on her journey and they actually missed her, that was something that resonated with me. I think because at the end of the day, like even if it was like sort of fucked up and weird, like they still had human connection, and I think that was something that sort of stood out to me when it came to their relationship. And then when she comes back and she's like a completely different person. Before she was waddling around and pissing on the floor and like not making sense and being a total child, but then she comes back after going on this long journey and she's poised and she's like learned a lot and she's just herself at that point. So that was seeing that sort of resolution was really cool, despite how fucked up they were, I guess.
Yeah, I started to soften up to the movie once she returned home to see Godwin. You know, I started to warm up a little bit, and then that scene where she and Max are walking by the river, and she asks, and they agree to get married, and then she asks him how he felt about her being a sex worker. Like I was starting to soften a little bit, and in some ways, I wish that the movie had been much more about relationships. You know, the relationships rather than this journey of self discovery that was sometimes really crudely conveyed and sometimes not. Like it was just, how can I say this? The whole long extended phase of her self discovery was might have been the least interesting part of the movie to me, and I'm wondering if there was why that was. And so I was thinking about all the things that created distance for me so that I wasn't as invested in the characters this time. One of the things I have to say was that as I thought the movie looked really beautiful, like was incredibly well designed. And I think in particular, one of the things that's really sticking with me is the color of the sky when she was on the boat. So the color of the sky is like this deep sapphire blue. Like it's incredible with the contrast of like the yellows against that deep blue. It was just a visual feast. You know, it was just really sumptuous to look at. And everything was just once everything went in color, everything was so sumptuous to look at. Like the materials, the textures, you know, her clothes, the colors were just so saturated. It was really, really beautiful. But the aesthetic itself uses do you know that's like a steampunk aesthetic? Do you know what that is? Yeah, so it's a steampunk aesthetic, which I hate for whatever reason. I don't know why I hate it so much, but I hate steampunk of all kinds. Like, I don't like steampunk jewelry. I don't like steampunk dressing up. Like, I think that parts of it are quaint and quirky, but I think that the reason why I might hate steampunk so much is because it's an aesthetic that came of it's an aesthetic that really came into being based on Victorian England. And so it was right around the time that England and other countries were really becoming industrialized, you know? And as these countries became industrialized, particularly England, that's when you had like the birth of all the social ills that came with inequality. Like even though there were always like different classes and there was always poverty, it was 10 times worse, I think, in industrialized England, where you had that's where like Charles Dickens became a famous writer, where you had, you know, so many orphans, so many people getting addicted to alcohol, so many people living in filth and in total poverty, you know? And so everybody was hailing this time as a time of great technological advances. And instead, it was a time when really oppression was really starting to get some legs, you know what I mean? Like mass oppression and capitalism. It was kind of like the birth of capitalism, you know? And so in this movie, so people developed this alternate aesthetic for steampunk, you know, where you had like people wearing these like sci-fi futuristic things over very recognizably Victorian outfits, you know, like Victorian clothes. And so it's kind of like, you know, Poor Things had this gorgeous aesthetic, and then you have this one glimpse behind the curtain. Remember where she sees the kids in the slums, you know, and Jerry Carmichael's character shows her how there are kids who exist, you know, and in total poverty, and they're dying of starvation. And so I feel like the movie, you know, Sarah, my favorite movie critic, said that the movie is deeply, deeply cynical. And I kind of agree that the movie is deeply, deeply cynical. It is so, so cynical. It's so cynical about society. It's so cynical about men, you know? And it's so cynical about how trapped women are. And even though it offers, you know, some optimism, like Bella Baxter fights her way to freedom, you know, or she to some type of autonomy, the price that she has to pay in order to gain that autonomy, she has to exist in a completely marginalized space. You know what I mean? Like there's no way that she can be a part of society and still exist. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like this, how can I say this? It was a big contrast to the Holdovers. You know, it's a totally different kind of movie. First of all, like it's a totally different type of movie. I agree. But the reason why it was such, like the Holdovers, I felt such affection for the characters. I felt such affection for the characters and what they were struggling with, and what they were what their trials were, and then also how they were retaining some type of optimism or some type of like sense of goodness, you know. And in this one, I did not feel that affection for any of the characters, even for Bella Baxter, because I did not know, by the way, Eric, I did not know how to feel about that character, Bella Baxter, because she came from horrible circumstances and she was put into another circumstance that was beyond out of her control, you know what I mean? And she had to claw her way out of that circumstance again. Do you see what I mean? Like she's like, you know how they say cats have 9 lives? She was like a woman with 2 lives, and both lives were horrible, and she was trying to figure out the best way to get out of them. You know what I mean? Or to like she was trying to find the best way to achieve some autonomy out of them, and so it was really, really depressing. And I didn't know how to feel about
I
it.
didn't. That makes sense. Yeah, and I agree. I didn't relate to the characters the same way at all. I would relate to characters in a lot of movies I love.
Yeah.
I think the perspective I took was one of curiosity and interest rather than like feeling for them. I think,
Right.
and I think that's more how Bella Baxter's character was experiencing her journey. I don't think it was her. Like while we could look at her situation and be like, she's escaping these things, or she's dealing with these men and all that stuff, which is true. The character in the story took it as, I'm just doing what I want to do, like, and there's these mild, annoyances in my way that I just want out of my way. That's fine, like, so it was discovery and exploration, but because
Oh wait, that's a really good point. By the way,
yeah.
That's a really good point.
I think that's what they were going for.
Yes, that's a really, really good point, though, because that means that you're feeling exactly what they were intending you to feel, which was that you are along for the ride for this curiosity and exploration, but you're not actually supposed to be overly invested in Bella Baxter. You're supposed to actually be like she is, which is a little bit detached and curious, like, this is just how I'm going to navigate my situation. And she's not filled with self-pity about it. She's not even filled with self-pity about it when she has to endure these sort of, how can I say this, the first couple times that she had to do, when she had to have sex as part of being a sex worker, those scenes were devoid of emotion. Like, how can I say this, so many other characters would be written as experiencing those situations as brutality or humiliation or degradation. She clearly did not experience any of those things as brutality or degradation. So therefore, you're, as the viewer, you're cued in like, okay, I'm not supposed to feel sorry for her in this situation, and I also don't identify with Mark Ruffalo's character, Duncan Wedderburn. I don't identify with him feeling so, judgmental and humiliated and outraged by it, because she didn't feel outraged or shamed by it. So therefore, why should we? So that's a really, really interesting point, that maybe I did not invest in the characters because they didn't intend they didn't intend for me to. But as a result, I was sitting there going, okay, where's this? What's she gonna? Okay, what's she gonna do next? You know what I mean?
I understood it. and I understood the journey, and the humor was reeling me in, and so was like a lot of the crazy things happening. I did think that it only detached for me a lot when it just was happening for what I thought was too long, like because
Yes.
she a lot of these situations where it was like it felt like she was just going back, or like, just doing things over and over again, even though that sort of fits the story of like her. It's almost like because she wanted to be a doctor, or like or she was experimenting, and a lot of that has to do with doing things over and over again to learn something. It felt just like repetitive sometimes, like so.
Right.
Did we really need every single type of man for her to fuck? Like, did we need the
Exactly.
guy teaching his sons how to have sex? Like, did we need that? And did we need like her going back to her ex-husband and then like experiencing what it's like to just be under the worst subjugation from like one of the most toxic men who like threatens to kill her all the time? So
Right. Right.
that's do we how long do those need to last? Because once we've discovered something, once I feel like I've discovered something, I feel like I got it. It's like I don't need to spend all that time.
Yeah.
But
So you think it was a matter of pacing, and it was a matter of pacing. Like it might have just, it might just have been driving the point home a little bit too hard and too many times.
yeah, I think so. But I could see why it might feel necessary from a different perspective. It's just like when I already, it was already something I was recognizing was not, I didn't have my heart set in, but I was just only curious about that. It just, I don't want to spend as much time, but a lot of other people, I think, could resonate a bit more. I mean, especially because I think it was so funny how absurd and ridiculous the world was, but how relatable those scenarios are. Like the guy, especially when Duncan is like feeling betrayed and like, you are stupid. What, and him freaking out. I think like lots of women could probably feel like they've been in that situation where men will just freak out for like no reason when nothing seems to be going wrong, or when they could just think about it for a second.
I wish that I had the reactions to the film that you did. I'm actually sitting here feeling envious. Like I'm sitting here thinking the way that Eric saw the film, and the way and the things that he liked about it, and the things he didn't like about it, or that he was like feeling a little bit like this was too repetitive. I'm sitting here like wishing that I had your reaction. I'm wishing that your reactions are mine. So because I did not feel that way when I was watching the movie. I was like sitting there, like at points I was just like drumming my fingers, like, okay, here we go again.
No, me too.
Okay, we're gonna
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
But I think
So I was
it,
just
it
like,
definitely
okay.
definitely depends on how you come into seeing the movie. Like, what's your mood and who are you seeing it with? What do you know about it before going into the movie? I knew that I had friends that really loved it, so especially my female friends. So like,
Yeah.
I think going into that, going in knowing that, I think it put a different perspective on it for sure. And I think on a rewatch, I could. That's what a lot of rewatches do. I think because I think a first time watching something like that, especially, even if it won't hit, maybe after talking about it and learning about it. I searched up some videos of reviews, and there was one TikToker who compared Poor Things to Barbie because they both tackle.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, they both tackle, you know, stuff about feminism and stuff about the patriarchy. And while Barbie's very much in your face about it, it's just like, this is what it is, and we're dismantling this, and we're talking about it. I think Poor Things was a bit more fantastical and like whimsical about that sort of thing. And this reviewer that I watched when she was talking about it said that at some point in the movie she had to stop thinking about like what Poor Things is saying about those themes, and just like just go along with the journey, because like if she thought too hard about what it was saying, and what message it was trying to deliver about feminism or something, then it just wasn't going to hit because it was so ridiculous and crazy. And there's funny comparisons, like if you compare Jared Carmichael's character to Alan in Barbie, or obviously Bella Baxter to Barbie. If I looked at them both, I mean, Barbie is sort of like even though it talks about a lot of important things, it's also sort of a commercial. It's a commercial for a car. It's a commercial for a toy. It's a ad for, like, a toy company. So there's all that, but then Poor Things is like raunchy. It's like funny. Like it's so outside of the norm. Like, those are two comparisons that I think are really important.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this comparison between Barbie and Poor Things, and I said that in my letterboxd review too. That I just feel like these movies are just they're shoving feminism and patriarchy so hard at you. It's like, how can I say this? It's so in your face about it. It's so in your face to show you that women are so constricted and they're so subjected to men's opinions about them, and then and women have to do extraordinary things in order to break free of the chains that are on them. They had to do extraordinary things to get free. And so I think that those themes obviously are perfectly valid. It's just that if you're a woman, you're reminded of them every single goddamn day. And so to have two movies try to work through those themes with in fantastical ways, like Barbie also tries to do this on a metaphorical level, because it's basically a make-believe world with dolls. And so the whole interaction between Barbie and Ken is like all this, like, this is our idealized world. And then, and our slight dip into the real world shows you that things do not operate the same way out here at all, And so, and it's just like Ryan Gosling saying to that. Remember when he said to the surgeon, "Can I do an operation? Because I'm a man." Just because I'm a man. "Please, can I just do an operation?" She's like, "No, no, 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 no." So I guess both of the movies milk a lot of humor out of this situation about how incredibly ridiculous and pathetic men are. But at the same time, in the real world, those men, those stupid, ridiculous, puffed up men, are very largely in power. And so it's a little bit hard to reconcile the messages of the movie with what is actually happening in real life when it comes to ridiculous men being in control. Mark Ruffalo, by the way, I'm on the fence about whether or not, like, I thought that he was, how can I say this? I guess he did a really good job. He was such a loathsome character. He was such a big baby. He was such a baby. He was so like sniveling and pathetic and puffed up and full of himself. He was just, I mean, he was like Trump, And so it was just awful how pathetic he was. And so I still am not sure how I feel about whether or not he was cast right for that part or not. But at the same time, he was just so ridiculous and so pathetic. And so it's just like Ryan Gosling playing Ken, like you have these men who are like utterly, utterly pathetic. And yet in the real world, they're the ones in power. So I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know how I feel about these feminist patriarchy themes being shoved at me so hard, Eric, because, I might be a little bit sick of it in real life.
I think that, I could see why them addressing these themes is a bit gratuitous, because for women, if they feel like since they experience it in real life, I could see why it's like hammering home a point that's like that should be obvious. But I think in this world of movies and films, it's very often not depicted, and especially in this sort of scenario where the women are the main characters, and also they are directly experiencing it, because most of the time they would be off to the sidelines or being some object of interest. And I think, you were saying that the message is that they have to do extraordinary things, like to overcome, a lot of that stuff. That's not what poor things like. Maybe Barbie, but poor like she becomes a prostitute. Like she like that's I mean that's what a lot of people would think is bottom of the barrel, but like she decided to experience that and she learned a lot from it. So um I
You
think
don't think that's an extraordinary thing? That's an extraordinary thing for that society.
right. Wait, what do you mean?
Well, Duncan Wedderburn reacted so badly because he was basically saying, how can you not value social position? How can you not value propriety and, good behavior? And she was like, I don't understand why you're so upset. Like she refused to play by those rules. You know what I mean? But by the judgment or by the norms of that time, she was doing something extraordinary in order to escape from being controlled by a man, you know? That's what I mean.
She wasn't doing that to escape. That's what I'm saying. Like she was like no, I think she just was like I need to make money, I guess. So let me just oh, so I just have to
I think she was doing it to
I
I think
could
she was doing it to be independent.
yeah. Well, not to be independent, but because she was just like stranded. She had just been yeeted on some boat by this dude. So then she found herself here and was like, okay, I guess I gotta find. I guess I gotta find out what to do. I could stay here. Cool. What do I have to do? I have to have sex. Cool. Awesome. Like I get paid. All right. Interesting. Like it's just like how it happens. And I think, I mean, what I like Duncan's character because he was so he started up like all the way up here, like I am the best at sex, yeah, and I'm the greatest dude, and then they just sort of whittled him down to like his barest fucking instincts, which was like being pathetic and just like wimpy and awful. So that's what was really great about, and it was so funny too because when of course when she's at the balcony and he's like Bella Bella, like so funny. Um, so I think I don't know. I mean, I guess it just made sense to me.
And what about Emma Stone's performance as Bella
Yeah,
Baxter?
I think that was probably really challenging because she actually I don't know. I mean, because her attitude was just sort of you know like I'm sure what was hard was doing all the intimate scenes because like that's like crazy and I don't I can't imagine having to do that on camera. But she did a really great job, and I think her character was conveyed really well. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that what I sensed about her performance was how deeply, deeply committed she was to being Bella Baxter. So at no time during actually at this okay, so at no time during the movie, there were times when Mark Ruffalo was on screen where I felt like I was watching Mark Ruffalo play Duncan Wedderburn, and then there were times when I was reacting to him as Duncan Wedderburn, the character.
that makes
But
sense. Yeah,
yes, and but there was no time that I felt like I was watching Emma Stone play Bella Baxter. I felt like she was Bella Baxter. Like I felt like
yeah,
I was watching Bella Baxter throughout the entire time. And
yeah,
then the other thing I thought was really surprising was I thought that Rami Youssef did a really good job as Max McCandless. Like I felt like I did not think, oh, that's Rami Youssef up there. I thought of him as Max, like this helpless, naive, like occasionally horrified, but very passive type of dude. I'm a little bit on the fence about Jerry Carmichael's performance because it was a type of performance where I can understand why they cast him because he has a certain type of elegance in how he delivers his words, and so he could sort of be this sort of elegant, somewhat like mysterious, effete character. But when Jared Carmichael was on screen, there was enough of a strain to see him trying to deliver a performance where I felt like saying, "Oh," I said, now I'm starting to appreciate what hard work acting is. You know what I mean? Like you always take it for granted that acting is like this natural talent that just emerges, and that you know what, like there's no work to it. But then when you see how really, really gifted actors can shapeshift between different characters and make you believe that they are that character, then when it becomes apparent when they're not succeeding, like I was sort of thinking, I can feel you trying, Jerry Carmichael. Like I can feel you trying in this role. And
yeah.
sometimes you're getting close to inhabiting like who you're supposed to be in the screen, but you're not, it doesn't feel seamless. Like I can feel you trying really hard. So I definitely felt Mark Ruffalo trying sometimes, but then there were times when he got there and then I was just giggling at how silly and pathetic he was, you know? Um so anyway, he just looked so petulant, like
Yeah. And then what about what do you think of Willem Dafoe?
the thing that he captured really well is that you kind of found it hard to believe how he could perform all these atrocious, ethically questionable scientific experiments. But then as he relayed how he made sense of the horrible things that his father did to him, then you sort of understood that there was this kind of pathetic dignity to him clinging to his view about this is why this happened. Like I had to reconcile myself to the incredible atrocities that my father perpetrated upon me, all in the name of science. So therefore, that's how I reconciled it for myself. And I'm going to try to then show other people more compassion than what was shown to me. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I actually thought that I thought that Willem Dafoe used his core assets as an actor and as a character really, really well. So I think that uh, I think he always has a type of gravitas in all of his roles. So I also feel like he's in everything.
Yeah. I think the fact that I've seen him in so many things now did dilute a little bit because I was like, that's Willem Dafoe. But
Hey, that's William Defoe.
then again, I love Willem Dafoe, so I don't care.
Yes. I
Um,
sort of think I had to see him in one of his most bizarre roles, but I don't really want to see that movie, which is The Lighthouse or
yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
yeah, it's that bonkers movie with Robert Pattinson. And apparently that movie is utterly and totally bonkers, and I'm not sure I need any more bonkers movies right now in my life. Anyway.
Yeah,
All right. So overall, what did you give the movie on Letterboxd?
a four.
Oh, I gave it
Um,
3.5 stars.
yeah, you give that's something I wanted to talk about also. I looked at your letterbox the other day, and like so many of your movies, you give 3.5.
Hmm.
So I wonder if you should be harsher on some movies and then like softer on some other ones. But I don't know. I mean, you gave Holdovers 4.5, so that was new.
Yeah, do you want to 3.5 is like a B grade. And a teacher once said to me that a B grade can mean so many different things. Like sometimes, there was an English teacher who told me this one time, but he said a B grade can sometimes mean that you were struggling so much at first, and then all of a sudden you got it and you had these amazing breakthroughs and you had these moments of brilliance. And yet the average of all of your efforts at the end of the semester is a B. Do you know what I mean? And he goes, whereas in other people, a B can just be sustained mediocrity. Like it can just be sustained averageness from start to finish. Like you're not the best or the brightest in terms of how you're getting the material, but you're just chugging along just fine. So you're average all the way through. And so I kind of think the 3.5 stars for me is like the B, you know what I mean? Because sometimes I give 3.5 stars to a movie that I enjoyed enormously, but it was not a very good movie. So, like all the Equalizer movies, I disproportionately enjoy those movies, but they're not great movies, you know? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
But
it's funny.
3.5 stars in this case for Poor
Yeah.
Things, by the way, it meant that I thought it was a really ambitious movie, and there's so much to respect and admire about it, like performances, production design. I mean, we can start breaking this down a little bit more, but there are so many things to admire about it, but it kind of left me cold. The whole
Yeah.
movie left me cold. So, in other words, there are shitty movies that I enjoy a lot more than I enjoyed Poor Things. But I don't think that those other movies, I think that those other movies were inferior. They didn't weren't trying to be anything other than, just what they called a B movie.
Right,
Actually,
yeah.
that's really funny. Like they just were a B movie.
Yeah. That's usually where the like option comes in for me. Whether or not I add a like to it.
Yeah.
Uh I mean, I give 4 stars to any movies I think are solid. Like are just like it's it's pretty good all around and not only technically how it's made, but how it's viewed also, like how much I enjoy it. Um but the like is the like is what I use to determine if it's something that actually like I personally enjoyed, um, or like that really that spoke to me in some way, or just because, like, I
Yeah.
give like my range of 3-star movies, for example. Like I have a lot of movies I just will give a 3-star movies that I'll give a like to just because like I had so much fun watching them, or whatever. But my criteria is a little bit flexible sometimes. But I
Yes.
think it would be good if you define sort of like, I don't know. I mean, yeah,
The
because
mushy bee.
yeah, because I'm not gonna undersell a movie if it's technically super well made, like that has to, and the script is good and the acting's good. Like that really matters. Even if I hate it. Like
Like
and
Zone of Interest, for example. You didn't
yeah,
rate it.
well, that's in a category of movies that I don't rate because they're about like tragedies, and I can't comment on like whether or not I like human tragedies. But
Yeah.
like that's characteristic for 2.5-star, 2.5-star movies.
Yeah.
Like Asteroid City. Like Asteroid City, I very technically well made and all that, but I just was bored and like I didn't really care. So that anyways, yeah. What were we gonna
That's
say?
funny. That's interesting. Okay, so I think that you're right to critique me for that mushy 3.5 stars, and to be clear
I've
about
been
what.
guilty of that too. So
Okay. Although I'm not sure I would, it's hard for me to rank a movie 4 stars or above that is technically superior, but does not move me or I'm bored the whole way. And maybe there's like, maybe the 4.5 stars, how can I say this? I'm left with the feeling like that I guess this movie just wasn't for me. Or it wasn't for me. So, the thing that I would say about these 3.5 stars, and I really do have to think about going back and re-rating Parasite, there's a through line between movies like Poor Things, Pan's Labyrinth, and um, Parasite. And I think that there's a thing that I have about meticulously constructed films. Like I'm talking about meticulously constructed films, you know? And so with films that are incredibly technically superior, and that Guillermo del Toro puts a lot of that into his movies, and certainly Bong Joon-ho does too, Certainly Yorgos does too. With movies that are meticulously constructed, it is it's I really get maybe extra critical about whether or not the story and the characters will mean something to me. Like whether or not I'm actually invested in the story and the characters and I want them like I get lost in the story. And so for Pan's Labyrinth, I actually was pretty emotionally caught up in the theme because it was that theme is about a child experiencing unspeakable atrocities, and this is how she makes sense of her world of unspeakable atrocities. She creates this fantastical, brutal, frightening fantasy, but
yeah,
it's more reassuring than what she is experiencing in real life.
yeah,
And so Pan's Labyrinth, I was able to get past the meticulous construction, but with Parasite and with Poor Things, I both admire what the filmmakers are doing, but I'm sitting back and thinking, I don't really feel anything. I don't feel anything for these characters. Like I don't feel anything, and I'm not lost in the story. So when the story takes these like twists and turns or whatever, I'm sort of curious, like, oh, I want to see what happens, but I'm not lost in it. I'm not in the middle of the story. So I think that there's something about the meticulously constructed movie where it sets a higher bar for me about whether or not I can really disappear inside of the stories.
yeah,
And by the way, books are the exact same way. So I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy books, and there are sometimes sci-fi and fantasy books that are hugely praised, hugely popular, and they're always, praised for things like world building, like they've created this whole new world and it's like totally in the it's amazing how imaginative it is. But if those movies create this whole incredibly brilliant, dazzling new world, but the characters don't show up for me, like I don't care. So like at some point, a third of the way into the book, I'm like, I don't care. I just don't care. So as I said to you earlier in the other platform that we were on recording the first part of the plot, I really love your take on the movie. I wish that were my take. I were wish that I were like, oh, Bella Baxter's character is all about curiosity and exploration, and I am along for the ride, through her eyes. But most of the time I was just like, just get me off this train, or can this train ride be over rather? Because I just wasn't feeling that wonder and delight.
It just depends. It's a personal
Yeah.
experience and that you have. And that's why I try to balance my ratings with like my personal attachment and how it's made as a movie because I don't want to disrespect um how like the filmmakers. And it's only when I feel like they've disrespected me that it gets into that like that it gets into two range. Like two
Right.
and a half is the lowest I will go for like a movie that most people actually like and is actually good.
Right.
Which which is ironic because I think Boy and the Heron maybe that I think I'll move that up because I think that day I saw that was probably just a bad day. But anyways, that's another reason. But like yeah, no, when my time feels like it's being wasted and they're disrespecting my time, you know. But
Yes.
I gave Poor Things 4 stars, and I one of my friends I told her we were doing the podcast, and then she was like, and I said, yeah, my mom didn't like it that much. She thought it was okay, and I was like, and she was like, well, you didn't like it either. I was like, I gave it 4 stars, like,
Right.
but my review said like okay, like because that's how I felt, like okay, like yeah, that's the movie. I don't know what to say, like,
That's really
uh,
interesting. So you like to really respect the craft, Eric. This is what I mean
yeah,
about the meticulous construction. You really like to respect the craft, and you like to respect the what a filmmaker has put in, even if it's not for you,
yes,
which that's great. Actually, I think that's great. I just um yeah, maybe I should rethink my poor rating.
I don't know,
My 3.5 stars. But it's interesting because Guillermo del Toro, again, this theme of meticulous construction and filmmakers who put a lot of technical aspects into it. Probably out of all of Bong Joon-ho's film, I felt the most emotionally moved by The Host.
Hmm.
And then like the most like rooting for the characters, the most like sort of gripped by the story itself. I think that the thing is that sometimes I think the filmmakers who put so much into the technical aspects of the film, they design it really beautifully, they cast really well, they direct it, the pacing, editing, everything's great. Sometimes I think that they get overly enchanted with the technical aspects and they forget about the story part of it or the human part of it. So I think this is the issue with the meticulously constructed films is that they function entirely too much like allegories and they don't function enough like stories. So I lose the
Yeah,
story aspect of it and instead it's all about the allegory.
that's
So
so real.
yeah, so that is the thing that I'm trying to convey in that 3.5 stars, which is, dude, maybe other people could follow the story, but I was entirely like I just felt like you were beating me over the head with the allegory part of it.
I can't tell you how real that is, not just for like movies in general, but like student films here,
Yeah.
made here. Because I swear to God, because I hate that we're getting into this. It's fine, but in our class we just have to watch cuts, right? And
Right.
like and I'm sitting there and I'm like and most of the time the biggest thing I get annoyed by is that they don't have like endings really, or like the ending is that she died, or then everybody died, then she was insane, or then he lost everything, like that's
Right.
the ending, like.
Right.
And it's because they care about like, well, it's about like loneliness and like dealing with your mistakes and like consequent, like I just want a story like
Right.
that,
That's
like
right.
fully completes, like, and the care, and like that's what I care about. And
Yes.
just because you want to make some big message about that doesn't mean I'm gonna enjoy it, and I don't usually. I don't. So, but so that was a very good point. Yeah,
Okay. So, but I take your point that 3.5 stars does not tell people how I really feel. And it is where I stick both the dumb movies that I loved too much and the admirable movies that I didn't like at all.
yeah,
So they don't belong in the same rating. And I'll try to use the like button more judiciously. Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
See,
Okay.
okay. One more example is Oppenheimer. I gave Oppenheimer a 4.5, but I didn't give
Yes.
it a like. I think that's an amazing film, and it's about something that's really thought provoking. But like, I mean, you know, atomic bomb. Yeah, I guess that matters. I don't know. Anyways, we'll leave it there.
Yeah. By the way, for the movies that I don't like, that were entirely too much about allegory and not enough about story or people, I will say that I feel such a relief when I feel something while watching those movies. You know, like so I just I felt something when Bella Baxter was walking down by the river with Max. I really did feel something. I felt like this is the moment where she's starting to become a human being. And then when she decided to go with her abusive husband, I felt like I was again being hit by a hammer in terms of what the theme, what the allegory, what the themes are all
Yeah,
about.
actually, yeah.
So yeah,
That
so
happened
in other words,
after.
yes, but when she returned to Godwin, when she told Godwin that she was back and he was so happy to see her, I felt so happy at that moment. And then in Oppenheimer, it was the moment where he was talking to Albert Einstein, you know, by the pond or by the river, you know, or afterwards after the bomb. And so there are these moments in a film, you know, some of these films are super long and you're watching them and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait a second, I'm feeling something. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not just reacting to it, but I'm actually feeling something. And you're like,
yeah.
I kind of wish I was feeling that way all along.
Yeah, that's so great because like that is what makes it to the 4.5 range for me is when it actually
Yes.
when a moment or two will make me really feel something. Like I think Poor Things made me feel a little something, you know, like
Yes.
little nice little things like okay, that's interesting and cool. But
Yes.
when it actually makes me really feel something like Oppenheimer with the bomb scenes and stuff like
Yes.
that, that's when I can put it up there, you know.
Yeah.
But then but my favorite stuff is when it makes me feel everything, you know. So
Yes. Yeah. In exactly. My favorite is when I feel everything or I feel it most of the way through the movie. I will just say, by the way, that in the favorite, it was only when Olivia Colman was on screen that I really felt something. Because she played this, you know, kind of mad queen. And everybody was trying to manipulate her and, you know, get her power to, you know, try to access her power to their advantage. And meanwhile, she was this like very sad, pathetic creature who, you know, had a lot of bunny rabbits that she really took a lot of love in. So anyway, anytime she was on the screen, anytime Olivia Colman was there, she was so, she was just so real, you know, and I think that is a trick of really great performances. Okay, that was actually a much better discussion than I thought. And by the way, we should end by saying that I probably was in a really, I should note for our two listeners that it was my birthday when I saw Poor Things. But I saw it in the theater that I hate. I saw it at the Showplace Icon, which is a terrible, terrible theater. It's a terrible theater, and the seating is horrible. You know, I hate the way that the headrests like push your head out.
yeah.
And then the concession stand is really weird because like you have to order from these like confusing kiosks, and then they deliver the food to you at your seats. And then last but not least, the seat adjustments. Whenever you hit the motorized control,
Make a squeak.
it's not just a squeak, it's like a long drawn out flatulence. Like
Yeah, yeah, it's like a
the
fart. Yeah. Yeah.
every time it moves. It is and the employees there seem so depressed. Like you can tell that they are just like in a terrible theater and they just don't like it. So anyway,
They get
that's my
complaints all the time. Yeah.
yeah, so it was the theater, it was my birthday, and I wasn't having a good birthday because I was still coming down over all my anxiety over Jack having all those procedures the day before. So, was not in a great headspace. So I'm very, very sorry, poor things, but I was not in
And I saw this like 2 or 3 weeks ago,
yes.
and I also looked up a lot of stuff about it, or not a lot, but like I saw some stuff on it, and then also I'm just excited to like talk. I've had a shitty day, so it's like this is just better.
Yes. All right. But anyway, thank you. Thank you to anyone who's watching. Catherine was utterly delighted that we gave her a shout out for the holdovers.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
yeah, it was very cute. And thank you to anyone who's watching. And Eric, as always, I love you.
Love you too. Thank you.